Hey there, Groovesters and Groove Stars. Ridgely here with another Groove Growth program, and I'm absolutely delighted to engage in what I am certain is going to be a very meaningful and unique conversation with my new friend, the author of the book, The Body Joyful, Anne Poirier. Anne, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I know you've made it a study, an art, a science to look at this whole thing of the body image. And it is so huge today, especially ever since the advent of social media and all of the pundits and all of the befores and afters and all the people who are trying to sell stuff, which, oh, by the way, includes pretty much everybody we're talking to right now, but not necessarily in the fitness area. And yet there's so much more to this whole thing about the body image. Tell us, first of all, a little bit about you and your story, and how did you come to writing this book, and why was it so important to you?
Well, I grew up really hating my body for so many years, and it was just part of my identity. It became part of who I was, that I did not like my body. I did not fit in. It wasn't the way it was supposed to look. I didn't look like the other kids. And so I was always trying to fit in and trying to reshift and reshape my own body so that I would fit in and look the way other people looked, or what I thought other people wanted me to look like. And so it just became a roller coaster of on and off dieting plans and different types of medication and shifting and going to Weight Watchers and all of the different communities around weight loss, and then books and magazines and plans and proportions and measuring. So there's all of that. And then exercise and compulsive exercise and marathon running, and always just trying to make my body do what I thought it was supposed to do. And it never was good enough. No matter where I was on the scale, no matter where I was in my life, I always was looking to be different. So somehow it was something other than my body, but I didn't know that at the time. So it was this driving factor of my life for way too long.
Was it sort of a compare and despair, or was it more of a self-loathing kind of? Well, from what place were you coming from?
Completely self-loathing. It was much more my own internal self-worth and feeling not good enough, right? And I think that that happens for a lot of people these days, just not feeling like we are the way we're supposed to be. And I do believe there's some comparing that comes along with that, but it's not always that. It's more of an ingrained, I'm not worthy unless I do this, unless I can do this, or fit into this size pants, or wear these clothes, or get this job, or have this relationship. You know, it's always that striving, perfectionism-ish type of pursuit.
Now, is it a perfectionism, do you think, or do you think it's more about somehow we've got this story playing that I'm not good enough? And that story obviously didn't manifest by itself. It had to come from somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And the story, it is that story. That's the story that we all find somehow in our early lives as just what we learn growing up. And part of my story that I told myself for all of these years was that I was a chubby baby, that I was stocky and sturdy and a bull in a china shop, so very clumsy and klutzy. So these are all the stories that I learned very early. And then they were magnified and strengthened by experiences that I had, right? I had this story planted. I call it a seed, right? We plant the seed of chubby little baby. And then the next thing you know, so I'm looking for proof. My brain is looking for proof that I am fat and that I don't look right. And I found it year after year after year. So always knowing that that's who I was, and then continuing to pursue something that would change me so that I could be different. look different. So you're absolutely right. It's that story that gets kind of planted, and then we just continue to water it and feed it, and it grows stronger and stronger and stronger.
So what can we do about all that? Because if I think about all the people that I know, good people, caring people, smart people, and so many of them are caught in that story. And I do want to talk about particulars that people could do if they had the discipline and other aspects there, but so many people caught in that story. What can we do about this?
It's noticing that it's a story. It's that first noticing and awareness that, is that really me? Or is that a story I'm telling myself? Is that my identity, or is it a story? And can I start to question it with curiosity and find some other answers or some other possibilities or other things that might be part of this story that I've told myself? And that's really, so I could continue to hear the same voices in my head saying the same things over and over again. And that's where I started to notice them and question them and say, are these being helpful, or are these really hurting me and not being supportive of where I want to go and what I want to do? And that was the first step.
Yeah, and how do you recommend that people go about that process? Can you give us, if you can, kind of like some particulars? What can a person do about that if they notice that they are mentally beating themselves up, for lack of a better word or better term, and they kind of think, well, I know this is a story I've got going on. What can I do specifically to kind of challenge this notion?
Mm. It's really taking that voice and the words out of your head. So I actually named it something else. And so I was able to say, oh, that's my mini me, I called it. So that's my mini me talking. What is my mini me saying? I wonder why that mini me is saying that. Where was the first time that I started to say that? How long ago was that? What was happening in my life? So I just created this whole body timeline for myself from the time I was born until, my mid 50s, going, what happened and what are the stories and the experiences that have really just strengthened this mini me voice inside of me? Whose voice is it? Where might it have come from? Am I still willing to hold on to that voice? Is it a true voice? Is it always true? So it's just so much curiosity and questioning of our own thoughts.
Right. And what have you found has been sort of for you the metamorphosis of this, or the biggest benefit from having gone through that process?
Really coming out the other side and having a completely different voice, a more compassionate, a stronger voice, one that does have some confidence, can allow me to say yes to things that I would never have said yes to, would allow me to go to the beach in a bathing suit that I would not have done, or get my picture taken with friends on a night out that I would not have done because I didn't want to be seen in my body, right? So it just opened the door for so many more experiences and for me to feel good in my body. And it cleared the brain space from all the beating up.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny how I love the saying that it's very difficult to unknow what you know. Like at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know, but then you know something. It's very hard to unknow it after that, right? It's very hard to go backwards into, well, I'm going to erase that learning from my brain. Like, no, I don't think so. And so it led you to actually writing this book.
It sure did. And I love that, because once you do know, it is a stepping into that and allowing yourself to step into it and realize that it's going to be uncomfortable because you're not used to it. And I think that's part of the reason a lot of people don't, is because they don't want to step into that uncomfort. It's so much easier to stay. I used to say I was so good at beating myself up that it was easy. I was really good at it, so why not just stay here? Because it's really hard to step out and be nice to yourself, or to make a decision that is hard or scary.
Mhm.
And those are the things that need to happen if you want to start to change the way you think and your thought patterns.
It almost seems as what you're saying that change is the thing that's scary. Because obviously, if I don't feel good, I should be able to recognize, hey, I'd like to feel good, right?
Mhm.
It's the getting from I'm used to being self-loathing, I'm used to being negative, I'm used to being stressed out to I got to make a change. I have to confront that thing because it's not going to happen automatically.
Exactly. There's got to be the awareness, the witness, and the willingness to
Mhm.
shift that thought pattern. And that becomes very challenging for many people. That's why sometimes it's more of a neutral. Can we at least move away from the negative into a neutral voice and into some neutral thoughts and feelings? Because that can at least get us started in the right direction instead
And
of jumping to go ahead. Mhm.
oh, so in some cases they're so chronic. I remember being at a personal development workshop of which I've attended like everything there is to attend, and I'm sure there's some out there that some weird thing out there that somebody's done that I haven't done, but I don't know what it is. And this particular one had a component of walking on broken glass.
Mm.
And these guys bring in this massive tarp. It must have weighed like 400 or 500 pounds. It took four guys, and they open the tarp, and there's this just mountain of broken glass, right? And so the whole purpose was you have to overcome your fear. And this guy just walks out in the middle of broken glass, starts talking to you, starts going this whole thing. And I remember thinking, this is really weird. And I don't know what's going to happen. I've done enough of these things to know that if we're really dangerous, the guy would have been sued and put out of business, and he's not. So I think we're in pretty good shape on the logical side of my brain. But the emotional, the other side was like, what are you thinking? And then I walked out on the glass, and it was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. It was not even hard. It even felt good. I went into a yoga tree on the glass on one leg, do whatever, just hanging out on the glass. And at the same time, there was a young lady there who was so afraid she would not take her boots off. It was like, no, part of the exercise was first, we're going to take our boots off. We're going to talk about this, or our shoes. Then we're going to take our socks off. We're going to talk about this. And then we're going to step onto the glass. And this young lady was like, she was like terrified to the point of, I'm not even taking my boots off. So how do you deal with that situation where someone has something so deeply ingrained that it really takes some kind of massive act of courage to confront those scary monsters that are mini-me's?
I know, that's such a good story because for her, what is her story around broken glass too? We could track that back to being, a 3-year-old running in the beach and getting cut with a piece of glass and having this big ordeal around that one little thing. And then that became a huge story, a scary story, one that she never wants to experience again, right? So you don't really know her story and what was underneath that. So how do you step into the emotion? What are you feeling? What are the thoughts that you're telling yourself? Oh, tell me what's going on in your brain. So we could actually look at it, bring it out of you, and we can look at it on a table and say, are these things true? What happens when you're seeing people walk on the glass and no one's yelling or screaming? And so is this true? Are these true thoughts that you're saying to yourself? And can we actually kind of peel back the layers on why it is so terrifying? Because I'm sure, lots of stories underneath that for her that are telling her, don't you dare. It was a life or death kind of circumstance for her.
I mean, it's funny because I'm getting the sense that this, while of course it applies to the body, it applies to all kinds of things that we confront, right? It's not just body related. It's the people who are scared to death of starting a business,
Mhm.
because of all this story, this baggage that they have going on, or scared of stepping out. Even really smart people, they're like, oh, I just don't think I can do that. Or I don't, that's not logical. If you're a really smart person and you've been able to accomplish all of these things, there's no reason why you can't also accomplish this thing unless there's a story going on.
Mhm. Right. And finding out what that story is and where that story came from, and opening up the door to some of those, the self-talk, the mini me's, all the people in their heads that are telling them they can't. And
Mhm,
that's how we can step forward into finding the proof that they are successful, that they did this hard thing and this hard thing and this hard thing.
mhm,
And
mhm.
what's different about this particular hard thing, what's going on. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time and patience to wander in there to see, but the thought pattern is connected to an emotion that is driving that relentless no,
Mm.
or hate or frustration or fear. It could be any of those things, right? There's
Yeah,
something that's deep under there that's really planted, that it takes a little excavating to try to figure out
yeah,
what's going
for
on.
sure. For
Mhm.
sure. In Groove, we have so many people that are beginning a dream to take their business online, to take their voice out to the world, to express themselves and be heard, sometimes directly, sometimes through a product or a service. And all of that takes a little bit of courage. And I'm always found the word courage fascinating, because cœur in French is heart. So courage is the age of the heart. How do we bring that heart space and open it up to
Mm,
possibilities, as opposed to shutting it down because of those fears?
right. And the closing down happens in periods of time and experiences that just happen around us, or not, I don't want to say to us, because I think they happen for us on this other side, but
Mhm.
they're happening, we think at the time they're happening to us. And it's our perception and the way we take it in, and then the stories that we tell with all of that, that leads us into particular pathways of
Mhm.
of this fear and not wanting to step out of the path, right? And I think when we think about some of our patterns of our own language, like we carve a path in there, and I think all the grass around the path is grown, and then if you want to change the path, you got to step into like the weeds. So I use that kind of term, stepping into the weeds, because stepping into the weeds isn't comfortable, because it doesn't feel that great. Could
Yeah.
get prickers, or there could be snakes in there, it could be all kinds of things. But in order to make a shift, we have to kind of step into the weeds and start a journey into that uncomfortable space. And that takes opening of the heart, understanding I might get hurt, realizing this might be hard, and taking the risk to do some of those things.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting because obviously, The Body Joyful, the book you wrote, is focused particularly on the shame and all that about the body. And we'll come back to that in just a second. But the principles we're discussing are much broader than just your physical self-esteem, so to speak. It's all the mental stuff that goes along, which is why programs like Group Growth are so valuable, because we understand that if you want to be successful out there in the world, you have to be successful in here. You have to kind of go through the process of doing all those things to trick your brain into whateverness. I I still to this day have these funny, goofy things that I do. That one of the things I do is I maintain very high bank balances. Why? Do I need to do that? No. Do I have a financial advisor? Yes. Would she recommend that I do that? No, because the money is not working for me, so to speak. It's sitting there. But it makes me feel more comfortable. And I am really happy that I never have to worry about it, right? And I sometimes find myself being super grateful for things that I know are maybe big for some people, but for others, you'd never even think about. Like, I'm so grateful that I never have to look at the grocery bill. Like, I just get the groceries and I put the credit card in and I walk away and I'm like, I don't have to look. Well, why don't you look? Because I really don't need to. It's not a great use of my time and I don't have to and whatever. Well, why do you not have to? Well, because, and I got this whole story going on. I can trace it all the way back to, well, my bank balances are really high, so I don't really need to look at that much, right? But it's still a story.
Yes, it is. But it makes you feel better, and that's what matters. So it's what makes you feel safe and secure in your life, in the way that you live your life. And it's also, I think it's all that, like, how much brain space do we really want to take up with certain things? Right. And when something is taking up a lot of brain space, that sometimes is a hint. Maybe we should look at that and ask ourselves, why is it taking up so much brain space? And is there something we can do about it to help it out, help us out?
And generally that brain space is rent free. So it's not like you're getting paid to have something occupy that space up there. I think this is such a key underlying all of what we're saying is a fundamental premise of personal development and personal growth and getting to the next level, which is often very difficult, which is the concept of personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you are where you are because of the thoughts, words, and deeds that have brought you to where you are at this very moment. And therefore, if where you are at this very moment is not where you want to be, then you kind of have to have different thoughts, words, and deeds, or you have to unpack those thoughts, words, and deeds, those stories, as we were talking about, to see which ones are the ones that are serving me and which ones are not. Because otherwise, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting some kind of a different result. Just not going to happen. And yet that taking personal responsibility has that same level of fear and anxiety that we spoke about with the self-loathing stuff. It's just, well, no, me? I'm responsible for me 100%? What? No, not me. Got to be somebody else out there that's responsible.
And it's so true. But taking responsibility of your own actions and making choices and making conscious choices. And I think when people don't think that it's their responsibility, it's because the chain reaction is so automatic that they don't think they can break it. And so the choices of whether it's food choices or not wanting to exercise or any of those kind of not wanting to go to work, right? Feeling sick or taking too many days off, whatever it might be, it's their choice, but they don't realize that they can still question some of the thoughts. And how can we kind of break that chain? Because it's so ingrained. And I really, in my book, I talked about stepping back. So at each chapter, there's a step back where we can step back and really look at our life from a different perspective, because we see everything in such a tunnel vision. How can we step back, open up our vision, and see completely different perspectives and realize that I'm the one that's making my choices? How can I slow down my choice making so I can make some different choices if I want a different result?
Right. So let's jump in. So we kind of talked a little bit more generally about how important this is to life, so to speak. Now let's talk about the body itself. What have you found in the writing of your book, in particulars that you've experienced or seen with yourself, with others, with clients you've spoken to, friends, et cetera? What do you see are the things that people most wrestle with in going through the process of taking a hard look at themselves and changing their story?
Right. And it is looking at themselves and blaming their body for everything. Right. And Brene Brown would say, if we're blaming somebody or something, it's because we're in pain. So there's something that's bothering us, there's shame or there's pain, and so we blame. And so for myself, I just blamed my body for everything, because it was my body's fault that I didn't get that job, or it's my body's fault that I couldn't teach that class to the ability that I wanted to teach, right? So I always blamed my body and punished my body. And how can we start to see all of those things differently, taking that responsibility for my own actions, but understanding and actually validating some of the reasonings why I had these stories, right? I was able to step back and say, well, it's no wonder I made those choices because that was all I knew at the time. I think about that with parenting, right? We always think back and go, oh, if I knew now,
Right.
if I knew then what I know now, I would have made a different choice for my daughter or my son. I would have done something different. And hindsight's always 2020, but how can we see ourselves in that same, allow ourselves to kind of look at a choice or decision from a few different perspectives before we make it, and then say, okay, what's the one that is really going to get me towards something that's beneficial or making a change? And if I make the wrong one, that's okay. At least I tried something different, because I know that this particular choice that I've been making for the last 40 years has really gotten me in the same place. So that one's not working. So let's try a different one. If it's the wrong one, that's okay. It's giving yourself permission to step in and say, I'm going to try something new because what I've been doing isn't working. And I'm sick and tired of it not working. And I want something different.
And what have you found with the people who go down a path, get a little bit of traction, and then backslide and fall into that trap of, well, it didn't work for me. Just didn't work for me. Even though we all know that if you did make lifestyle choices that were healthier, you would feel healthier, look healthier, be healthier, whether you like it or not. At the end of the day, no matter who you talk to, everybody knows that although they may taste great, potato chips are bad for you.
They have things that aren't going to help you in what you're looking for, and in what you're looking for, if you're looking for a specific result, right? And so, when it comes to the people that I work with, it is easier to fall back into the old habits because it's more comfortable. And for a lot of them, there's some trauma underneath. And so it's a protection mechanism. So allowing themselves to just go back to their old behaviors and habits gives them that comfort and helps them feel safe and secure. And so those are the stories that we have to start to unpeel and look at differently. And when it comes to, food and eating, I allow all foods. Like, let's experiment with foods, because as soon as you say, no, you can't have those anymore in your life ever, the first thing for my brain and for a lot of brains are, well, don't tell me what I can and can't have, because I'm just going to put my hands on my hips and eat whatever I want, right? Because that's the rebel that sometimes comes out. But it's, how do we really see what's our big why? What are we looking for? How do we want to feel in our bodies? What do we want to be able to do in our bodies? How long do we want to live in our bodies? And let's backtrack, right? Reverse engineer from there and say, okay, if you want to be able to do this, this, and this with your body, then what are the things that we need to continue to work on in that process, right? And what are the things that you can eat? What are the things that you can do to move your body? How can you talk to yourself through those things, right? And how can you look at yourself in the mirror without beating yourself up, and finding some, even neutral tones for your legs that are so strong, or your arms that are so strong, or whatever, it's just those little teeny changes one at a time.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, right? Because there's so much adulation toward people who look a particular way. And the part that gets immensely overlooked is that they look a particular way because they act a particular way, and because they make decisions that are very different than the decisions that everybody else makes. And this is without judgment, yet it's very real. There's a reason why certain people are super fit and look amazing, and it is not potato chips. Not to go back to that same analogy, but it's just not. And by the way, I love having this conversation because I'm really looking at it more from a psychological, emotional perspective. And you're talking to a guy who's gluten-free, who doesn't eat any junk whatsoever, hardly any sugar, no chips, no rice, no bread, no pasta, no, nothing, zero. Which is why I can walk out the door right now, put on a pair of shoes, and run a 10K at 62. Right?
Right.
But it didn't happen by accident. It happened by a lot of, is this important enough to me or not? So it took me a long time to decide I don't want to eat gluten. And then after doing no gluten and thinking, wow, my memory is much sharper without any gluten, I'll continue this. Then about 2 years later, I decided reading a lot about longevity and this idea of fasting is really good for you. So I went into intermittent fasting. It took me 18 months to decide that that was something that I really decided was good. It was not like it was happening really, really fast. And then after doing that, I said, you know what? I think I just want to shave off the last little remnants of whatever might be there and see what we can rebuild. And so then I went into full, what is basically Atkins, keto, low carb, call it whatever you want. And I've been there ever since. None of those things were easy. And all of them were deliberate processes over time with many stop and starts. Oh, you know what? Tonight, I just don't care. Wah, 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 wah. Or, there's a lot of those wah, wah, wah moments of I don't care. I deserve to eat unhealthily today, so I'm going to, and that's just the way it is, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What do you say? How do we help people kind of love up on themselves a little more so they can love themselves enough to make the right choices? I ended up having to say with intermittent fasting, I ended up having to say to myself, I love myself enough to not eat today and rest my organs. And I created this little mantra. I love myself enough. Now, I'm not suggesting that's for everybody, by the way. I know it's a lot more difficult for women than for men. But the serious functional medicine people that are out there, the Mark Hymans of the world that run the Cleveland Clinic, are all saying that the very best thing you can possibly do for longevity is to fast. Rest your organs. Do all that.
Yes.
Tough to do for a lot of people.
For sure. And I think that's the key, though, is like, how do you want to live? And what are your choices along that line? And this loving yourself, it's such a great, I use the analogy, good gift, bad gift, right? My daughters, when they were teenagers, turbulent relationship, to say the least. And we had gotten, their dad and I had gotten divorced. So it was a messy kind of a thing, right? But they gave me one year for Christmas a stuffed animal that I still have to this day. It was a stuffed animal that brought us back to a story from about 3 years ago where I had seen it somewhere. That little stuffed animal, Izzy is her name. She goes everywhere with me. And I realized I was treating Izzy, this stuffed animal, much better than I was treating myself. And this good gift, bad gift thing kind of came into my brain. Like, when we get a great gift, we cherish it. We take care of it. We do all these things for it. It becomes part of our life, or however that might look. And how can we teach ourselves to treat our bodies, like the homes that they are for us, that it's the only home that we're ever going to have. This is my home. How do I want to treat it? And if I don't like it, I'm not going to treat it very well. The bad gifts get regifted or thrown away or put into the back of the closet. And it's really seeing yourself through a different set of glasses that say exactly what you said. I love myself enough to do this for me and my body, this place that I live every single day of my life. And what does that look like for us? And those choices can be different for people, but the premise is the same. I love myself enough to treat myself with the respect that I deserve.
Mhm.
And I make the choices that help me in that path, right?
Yeah, there's just such tremendous wisdom in that, right? Such tremendous. It's like it's so simple, yet it's the wisdom of the ages. That I love myself enough to make the right choices for
Mhm.
this vessel that carries us around, heart, soul, spirit, mind.
Mhm.
All of those things. So we will for sure, down below, as always, Groosters, there will be a link where you can go and find the book, The Body Joyful from Anne. So final thoughts from you. What would you say to those people that are out there that have any kind of a demon, whether that's a shame about their body, shame about their mind, shame about their success potential? What would you say to those folks as we wrap up our fabulous conversation today?
One of my favorite quotes comes from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space, we get to make a choice. And those choices that we make every day, you have a choice. You always have a choice on the thoughts that you have, because the thoughts are connected to how we feel, our heart, and our behavior. And so if we can widen our space between the stimulus, the smell of the brownies cooking in in the kitchen, and the choice that I'm going to make around those brownies, whatever it might be, that it is honoring myself and my vessel, and I get to make that choice. And if I can widen the space enough, I can make the choice that's right for me.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of all of this process that we've been talking about.
The wisdom of widening the space so that
Mhm.
you can make the choice that's right for you. A process that is never ending every single day, all day long. The opportunities are presented to us in front of us to do exactly that. Anne Poirier, thank you so very, very much for your time sharing your wisdom with the Groove community. We wish you the very, very best with the book and all the rest of the help that you're doing to make this world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciated.